If compression on drums is a mystery for you, today is your day because I'm going to walk you through how I approach compression on drums on the PreSonus StudioLive Series 3 console. Of course, it all starts with getting the drums sounding good at the source, putting the microphone in the right place, getting the balance and preamp set, and of course your high-pass filter and EQ. If you haven't watched my videos on those, I'll drop them down in the description below, but with that, let's jump into compression. So now that we've EQ'd things, we can take it up one more notch with compression. Now, again, compression techniques vary widely, and it also depends on the way that your drum sounds coming in. If your drum sounds more snappy coming into the board, maybe you want to set up your compressor to add a little bit more punch. Or if it's super punchy but lacking the snap, maybe you want to set up your compressor to act more snappy. So I'm just going to do what I have here, but you might need to shift things one way or another based on the way that your drums are sounding coming in. And again, it's all those other variables that happen before the console. So with the kick drum on the standard compressor, I'll set my ratio to about 4:1, maybe 3:1, depending on how I'm feeling. My attack time, I like around 19 milliseconds. Could go a little slower or faster, and I'll show you what it sounds like when you shift that a little bit. But I keep the release time relatively fast because I want to control that initial transient, but I want the sustain to come back up so that I have some of that sustain. Now, it also can be helpful to listen with this again in context of the bass so that your sustain on the kick drum doesn't overwhelm the bass guitar itself too. So we've got to think about those two in tandem. As I roll down the threshold, you'll notice the level gets lower, so then I'll go over to the gain and make that up so that my level comes back to about where it was with and without the compression. And you'll see me bypass it so that I can check that as I'm going, so that if I have to bypass the compressor, or if I decide this compressor is not doing what I want it to do, I don't get a big level change and I don't have to rebalance on the faders. All right, if I had bigger subs to listen to at the moment, I might be noticing more low-end punching a little bit here. That's what I'm used to hearing with these compressor settings and this board, and this recording in particular, because I'm just really familiar with it. So I'm hearing a lot more snap, though, out of the kick drum, and so that's what the compression is doing. It's not just changing the level differences, if, say, he hits it a little bit harder or not so hard sometimes. It's actually changing the tone. So I might even go back to my EQ and dial back some of the top-end boost that I've got on there to get the compression that I want and the tone that I want with both of those tools together. So let me play it again so we can listen to it. Another little thing that you'll notice on this board is the comp or EQ coming first, right? So right now we have compression first going into EQ. Typically when you're cutting, I like to have the EQ first, but if you're boosting, I like to have the EQ after. I'm doing both here, so I'm just gonna experiment with it and see what feels better as far as EQ first or compression first. I always hit that button wrong. All right, I'm hearing some differences, but I'm not exactly sure which one I like better. It's gonna have to be one of those, how do I feel about it? There's no checklist of, is this better or worse? You just gotta go with your gut. Now let's compress the snare. So I've got the release at a time so that it's actually pushing up the ring when I compress it a lot. I don't necessarily love that. I might speed up my release time and then maybe slow down my attack time so that more of that initial transient hits through, but the stuff coming right after it doesn't necessarily do that. So let me just play around with it and see what I like, and you can watch along. All right, so it is still pushing up that ring a little bit, but it might be just me getting hyper fixated on something. Sometimes you got to get out of myopic mode and not get like super nerdy on any of this stuff and just go, does this feel better or does it feel worse? I'm kind of undecided right now, so I'm gonna keep going and maybe I'll get used to it and forget about it. Maybe I won't. Let's just see. Okay, so it is bugging me a little bit. So I'm gonna go back to my EQ. I'm gonna take one of these bands, instead of going super wide there, maybe I'll adjust this a little bit over here. And I'm gonna go to about, we'll try to find it on our RTA graph right here, but it's somewhere around 500 Hertz. So let me go over here and make this pretty narrow. So we're gonna go narrow, pull this down and see if we can find it and get it a little less, because I like what the compression is doing for the, I don't like what it's doing for the ring. Now, I don't often recommend that you boost and sweep to find something, but this is the time where I'm trying to get real surgical. Maybe I'm just OCD right now, but I'm gonna boost and try to find this one frequency that I don't like and then destroy it. Again, not my normal recommended practice, but right now, I'm on the hunt. Yeah. That's what I don't like. So here's another time where we're going to check out our comp versus EQ, which one comes first question. Not the most elegant way to say it, but there it is. So let's listen to this with that cut and then put the compressor after the EQ. All right, still not hearing a huge difference. Let me try making this a little bit wider. Of course, I don't want to get rid of all the body of the snare, but you can roast me in the comments if you think what I'm doing is ridiculous. I think it might be an octave higher than what I think it is. Let me just try this. Okay, never mind. I think I found it. I think it's right around 537-ish, and this is making me feel better. Now, again, I could probably avoid all of this by bypassing the compressor. Thanks, Ray, for that one. So let's just listen to what happens when I do that. Okay, it's not as apparent now that I bypassed and put it back on. It really could be me in my mind. So if that's you, you're not alone. Let's try another way to kind of see if we can get it to go away some, making our release time a little bit longer. I don't usually go this long on my release time on drums. I don't want to miss a second hit when they go for it. Let's just try it. Okay, slowing down the release time, kept it so that the ring was kind of over by the time the compressor recovers and pushes it back up. This worked. Not my typical workflow, but you get to see me in action as I'm making decisions today and how I'm feeling. So that's better, not my usual go-to, but it's working now. You could compress the toms if you wanted to. We can listen to what that does. I don't normally take the time to really dial it in, but I'll show you what I try when I'm mixing. So let's check it out. If you've watched many of my videos, you've probably heard me say it's all about the low end, but the full quote is it's all about the low end. When you get that right, everything else falls into place. And especially with the drums, the low end is a really important factor. We don't need just heads being smacked. We need to hear the oomph behind it. And even though we're not changing the levels of the low end with the EQ, when we're using the compression, the attack and release times can really make a big difference in the shape of the low end, on how much impact it has, and on how long it sustains. So if you love the feeling of great low end and getting it just right, go ahead and comment low end in the comments below. And if you're watching this and want some good starting places for how to approach EQ, compression, and effects on all the different instruments on your board, check out my live mixing field guide. It's available as an ebook or a physical copy, and each one comes with a free companion course on getting started with EQ and compression. Go to livemixingfieldguide.com or click the link in the description below to get your copy today. That sounds cool, and I like it. Let me play with the release time and see what that does for how much of the sustain it brings out or kind of lets taper off. All right, good 215 milliseconds is about where we're at, and that feels about right. I'm gonna try it with the high tom as well, if I can find a section where he's playing it. Here comes. All right, so it keeps the sustain a little bit more in your face for a little bit longer, and it feels bigger. So I like it. I'm glad I tried it. Now you could compress the overheads, especially if you want to try to get the snap of the snare out of the overheads so that maybe your snare doesn't have to get brighter as your overheads get brighter. But I don't typically do that. But again, we're doing lots of stuff that I don't typically do. But I want to show you a feature on here that I don't always use, or I rarely use it when I'm mixing, but I want to show you because I get asked questions about it all the time. It's called the key input. So on the overheads, I'm going to take down my high pass filter and have the snare drum in the overhead still, right? So we're going to still hear the snare drum. But on our compressor, we're going to go over here to our key source, and we are going to select, we're going to try this, key source, aha, we're going to go to channel 2. So the snare drum channel is what's going to be telling the compressor when to compress. So we're going to try that. So channel 2 is our key source. We can filter the key, right? So that's the frequency that we're looking at for that. We're going to just go broadband for right now. We can go to key listen if we want to hear that channel that is triggering the compressor or telling the compressor when to compress. And then we could be able to hear, like what frequency we're honing in on. So we'll try this. With our attack, we're going to go super fast, and release, we're going to, do something normal. I don't know, 100 milliseconds, 120 right now. Keep our ratio there and not mess with our gain at the moment and turn that on. So let's try this and see what happens. So you can hear how the snare drum is now triggering the compressor on the overheads. So we're getting less of the snare drum in the overheads. Now, does it matter in the rest of the mix? Let's listen and find out. So we can also hear the snap of the snare drum coming through the overheads, and we can minimize that or we can maximize it by turning it off. Again, it's a tool, it's a creative tool, and you can use it whatever way you want. I'm just showing you how it works. I hope this video and all the rest of the videos we've done on this series have been helpful for you. And so if it has, go ahead and hit that thumbs up to let YouTube know that it's great content and you want other people to see it too. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.